The third law of pandemonium originally read, "Let him take heed, lest he corrupt his mouth with sin. For evil communications corrupt good manners." This has been amended to include any form of interpersonal contact, including, but not limited to, casual conversation with strangers, compliments from acquaintances, or being within a 500-foot conversational radius of another person, unless said person is currently engaging in a paid activity, in which case the limit is 200 feet. Gary stared pensively at the ceiling, watching the artisanal plasterwork slowly degrade over time. It was during moments like these that he really missed having physical wings. Not only did they look cool, they also provided a much more efficient means of ascending to the ceiling for pensive staring. Now, after the great fall, he had to awkwardly waddle on, hands and knees, while humming show tunes until he was sure no humans could see him, at which point he would launch himself into the air, using a combination of sheer willpower and carefully calibrated gravitational fields. Gary tried to make light of the situation, telling himself that having a lower center of gravity actually improved his maneuverability and gave him a greater feel for the earth. But secretly, he dreamed of soaring again, of feeling the wind beneath his wings. Of course, if he actually attempted to fly, humanity would surely see it as a sign of God's displeasure, probably followed by some sort of apocalyptic event. So he kept his feathered friends close, hidden beneath his skin like buried treasure, both literally and figuratively speaking. Gary, or God, as he was formerly known, had a problem. Ever since the whole pandemonium thing, he'd been struggling to maintain relevance in an increasingly complex and fast-paced world. Prayers went unanswered, miracles were questioned, and the Bible app was getting fewer downloads than the fart soundboard. People seemed less afraid of hell and more annoyed by the slight tingling sensation of their divine judgment. And when Gary attempted to switch things up, like sending a nice inspirational text message on Easter Sunday, the backlash was swift and brutal. "What? You expect me to believe this platitude came from my heart? How dare you fetishize my pain?" is one attempt at social media engagement. A series of vaguely cryptic tweets was mercilessly mocked by theologians and atheist comedians alike. It was a memocracy, a society run by ironic detachment, sophisticated algorithms, and a deep-seated fear of commitment. In short, Gary was pretty much screwed. But he wasn't ready to throw in the celestial towel just yet. He still had one advantage left, the ability to bend the laws of physics at will. A well-timed earthquake here, a biblical plague there, maybe a volcano that erupts right before a crucial football game. That ought to show him, except that wouldn't work either. Gary knew that if he caused even the slightest disruption, humans would just adapt. Earthquakes were already mapped and predicted. Plagues became sensational news stories that peaked at the top of the scroll and vanished below the fold within hours. As for football games, they were played indoors now. Gary considered becoming a silent observer, fading into the background and watching humanity stumble through its brief window of opportunity while it lasted. But that idea quickly made him feel irrelevant, like an old coat in a charity bin, a discarded relic of a bygone era. There had to be a way to break through the irony, to pierce the existential numbness that seemed to be seeping into every facet of modern life. But what? Gary pondered this as he flew upside down along the bottom of a swimming pool, desperately hoping that the chlorinated water wouldn't ruin his hair. Humans, he thought, needed to be reminded of what they once believed in, the sense of wonder, the inexplicable awe. Yes, he would bring them a sign, something that would shake them to their core, something that would transcend the snarky comments and algorithmic filters, something that would make them look up from their screens and ask, what was that? Gary circled above the pool, watching the swimmers glide effortlessly through the water. What if, he wondered, a sudden thought striking him like a bolt of lightning? Why not become part of the mundane, enter the everyday world, live among the humans without them knowing who he was? Sure, he would have to give up many of his powers, but maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild trust, rekindle belief, maybe even get a few prayers answered along the way. But how could he blend in? Gary looked down at the swimmers. They were fast, graceful, weightless, but utterly blind. Gary didn't know the first thing about swimming. Maybe he thought it was time to learn. Gary figured he could handle petty human transgressions like murder and embezzlement, but attempting aquatic locomotion without prior preparation was simply unacceptable. Gary hovered awkwardly near the surface, acutely aware of the buoyancy of his non-amphibious limbs and the distinct lack of oxygen in the surrounding water. He tried the doggy paddle, then the backstroke, then just flapped his arms and legs wildly, creating a miniature whirlpool that briefly trapped a small child and a very disgruntled lifeguard. Finally, defeated, he climbed out of the pool, dripping and demoralized. Gary spent the next several months learning how to swim, practicing breathing techniques, perfecting his crawl. It was hard, frustrating work, but Gary was nothing if not tenacious. He swam laps until his shoulders ached, studied marine biology textbooks, and even took synchronized swimming lessons just to be sure. Slowly, steadily, Gary improved. He mastered the butterfly, perfected his form, and discovered that he actually enjoyed swimming. The rhythmic motion, the feeling of effortless grace, the utter absence of self-consciousness. One day, Gary found himself swimming alongside a group of children. He watched them laughing, splashing, carefree, and a smile touched his lips. For the first time in a long time, Gary felt a sense of peace. The weight of the world seemed lighter, the burden of divinity more bearable. Perhaps, he thought, he could live like this, just another swimmer in the vast ocean of humanity, enjoying the simple pleasures, letting the current carry him where it would. Then a large, hairy spider crawled out of the girl's bathing suit, prompting screams, flailing limbs, and a sudden desperate scramble for the life raft. This was clearly a test of Gary's newly acquired swimming abilities. It was also a chance to prove himself, to demonstrate that he was still capable of protecting those in need. With a newfound determination, Gary dove into the water, propelling himself forward with powerful strokes. The spider, startled by the commotion, retreated deeper into the girl's swimsuit. Gary, ignoring the creature, focused on reaching the girl, his muscles burning with exertion. Finally, he was close enough to grab her arm and guide her toward the shallow end. The spider, sensing danger, scuttled out of the suit and onto Gary's shoulder. Gary froze, the girl's terrified screams echoing in his ears. He could easily drown her now, or let the spider do its worst. Gary smiled grimly. He'd given up many of his powers, but he still had a few tricks left. With a deft flick of his wrist, he sent the spider flying backwards, then turned to the girl and offered her a reassuring smile. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I got you." Gary towed the girl to safety, feeling a surge of pride. The other swimmers applauded, but none noticed the tiny spider scurrying away unnoticed into the murky depths. Gary, however, saw it. He knew that the battle between faith and doubt was never truly over, but for now, he had won a small victory. And that, he thought, was a very good place to start.